This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
We're approaching that time of year where magic is top of mind. Halloween just a couple of weeks away. The Bible has some pretty specific things to say about sorcery. So why would God tell us not to do it if it doesn't do anything? Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. It's our monthly Iron and Myth Roundtable. Very quickly before we go to our panel, just a reminder, please download our free app to your smartphone or tablet. Also, we've got Roku and Apple TV versions. Why? Because it'll guarantee that we never get canceled. It is our app, the content hosted away from the gatekeepers of big tech. And not only does it get you all of our content, it's got additional features, a messaging feature, allowing you to interact with other like-minded believers, request prayer, very important in this day, and much, much more. You can find out more at our website, gilberthouse.org/app, available for iOS, Android, and Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. Again, also Roku and Apple TV versions, and you'll find out more at the website, gilberthouse.org/app. Joining us this month, as always, our regular roundtable for this Iron and Myth series. We're coming up on 2 years of this now. And I've got to say, this is my favorite series of conversations because it's iron sharpening iron. Best-selling author, award-winning screenwriter, author of the provocative new novel, Cruel Logic, showing that worldview ideas do have consequences. Brian Godawa, the pastor of the Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado in Boulder and an accomplished author in his own right, author of the 10th anniversary revised and expanded edition of Giants, Sons of the Gods, the man who gets credit for discovering the serpent mound of Bashan, and the man we like to call our friendly neighborhood PhD, the director of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, author of Interview with the Giant, Ethno-Historical Notes on the Nephilim, historian and archaeologist Dr. Jed Burton. Well, fellows, welcome. This is probably timely since this program is going to go out just a couple of weeks before Halloween. It's a time of year where we're thinking about the supernatural and wizardry and witchcraft. Witches will soon be walking the streets carrying little bags looking for Halloween handouts and treats and so forth. But what do we really know about magic and sorcery? I mean, I was raised in a family that I think, like a lot of churchgoers, we were just taught, well, there's no such thing as magic. Yeah, you can mess around with the occult, but it's just bad. Even being raised in a church-going family, one of our favorite activities, we go up to visit best friends, my mom's best friend. And, I was growing up with a kid, her son was just about my age, was to go over there and, pull out the Ouija board. So, we didn't think anything of it. Well, it's not really real. Let's just pretend. But Doug, we'll start with you as the pastor. I mean, God has some pretty specific things to say about magic, sorcery, and so on. So what do we make of that?
Isn't it funny that I think I kind of grew up the way you did? Magic's not real or whatever. And just think about the logic of it. And that's why we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Because what? It's a waste of time?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we've ever really even asked the question or thought about why we shouldn't do it if that's the answer. I mean, you run into this a lot when you start digging into the supernatural, the occult world. With I did this as a youth pastor, just kind of, this was 25 years ago too, so it might surprise some people, but downtown Denver, I start asking the kids if they've ever had any weird experiences, and sure enough, almost every one of the kids said something. Now at some point you kind of like, are they one-upping each other and it's not real or whatever because they're kids, but these sorts of things that we talk about on the show are real. And so if you move this into the realm of magic, in fact, one of those, there's a crossover, I think, that happened with one of these kids. She said that she had a demon in her house, and you try and investigate it, and turns out that she was doing a Ouija board with a friend. And just something that seems innocuous to a little kid. They make fun of it in the horror movies, so it can't possibly be real. And next thing you know, she has an entity that's in her house and, doing all kinds of crazy things, throwing her dog down the stairs and moving furniture around and all those kinds of things. So that's, that was doing a magic that they weren't even really caring about or trying to do. So, from there, I guess one of the things my mind goes to is the whole idea of pharmakia, and in that Greek word. I'm sure we'll talk about that quite a bit tonight, and just its relationship to plants, drugs, not only in the ancient world but in modern medication. Almost all of our medications are rooted, pun intended, I guess, in the plants. And then, of course, we add whatever we add to them with our technology. But that's a weird thing to me too, pastorally speaking, because we sanitize the pharmakia if it comes from a pharmacy in a drugstore. That's perfectly fine. But boy, if it's
and get your vaccine.
And get your vaccine, yeah. And pick a topic of a drug that's not popular, that the Christians like to speak bad against, and that's evil. When then you're in a weird place in Colorado, at least 10 years ago, and now it's happening almost every other state. Once upon a time, I was asked my name, and then when I tell them where I'm from, they say, "Oh, what about the legalization of pot?"
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to deal with this, and the question of what does pot do to the mind? What does it do in relationship to the other world? Is it the same as hallucinogenics? I mean, these are all very pastoral, practical questions that center around this idea of sorcery and magic.
Ryan, you've written about this, used the magicians, the court magicians of Pharaoh in your novel about Moses as part of your Chronicles of the Nephilim series, Janus and Jambres. And I know that you've done a lot of theological research as the groundwork, to lay the groundwork for those stories, so that while you used plot devices and speculated to fill in some of the gaps in the biblical narrative, the theology there is pretty sound. What did you find in digging into the biblical prohibitions on sorcery and its existence or lack thereof?
Yeah, I found a lot. I think one of the components of it that I found most interesting, because it was connected to various theological threads, was word magic. And I don't want. I guess these will be introductions that we can then focus on later, because there's a lot to talk about pharmakia for sure, drugs. But the word magic component is something that's been with us, since the beginning of recorded human history, even in Sumer. But of course, Egypt is one of the oldest. And, when I say use the word magic, what that means is it's the notion of incantations, execrations, using words to manipulate reality and to some degree. And obviously we still have that going on today, right? Whether it's even the abracadabra, all that kind of, even the modern day occultic stuff still believes in this notion of word magic. And what that is it's not so much that, I don't think, well, at least in terms of the ancient Egyptian worldview, right? It was the understanding, number one, that there's no supernatural and natural realm like we have. We have a very stilted, post-enlightened worldview, supernatural versus natural. So we tend to think in terms of natural laws, and then there's supernatural, which is something, whereas the ancient world didn't have those distinctions. And so their understanding was using words appropriately or properly actually allows you to access what is part of the natural world to them. I mean, it encompassed everything, which included both the regularity of what they saw in nature, as well as the gods. And one of the interesting elements of that was that, where to begin? You mentioned Janus and Jambres. I'll just focus on the word magic right now, because that was a really interesting thing. So, and it's not just that there's this magical, if I say abracadabra, it works. What they're doing is their words are connecting with the reality of the world system that they believe in. But they also did include, it wasn't just the words alone, they would include rituals, whether they would have the pit or various other, depending on what they're doing, right? So for example, one example is the execration text, which we've referenced a lot on this podcast, which is really interesting. And so if they wanted to curse someone, and curses, that's another one that's actually biblical as well, right? In fact, there are curses in the Bible, and we found examples of Jews writing curses as well. So curses is part of that word magic understanding of reality. And, so they would write the names of people that they wanted to curse on pottery, right? Whether, and it could be like armies, and when they're going into battle, or it could just be a person you hated that you wanted to take down or something. And then you would engage in either destroying the pottery or burying it or burning it or smashing it, right? And then that's the execration. Then that becomes the curse upon that person that's on the pottery. And it's interesting because if you read, there's a lot of Egyptianisms in Exodus. And if you read the Song of the Sea, which is, what is that? Exodus 15, I think it is. The way that the song is elicited, there are references to these execration activities, like, God crushed them, God burned them. Wait a minute, I thought the Red Sea drowned them, right? But he's using the burn, the crushing, and the burying, the terminology, in other words. So there's a lot of terminology that is in Exodus where it's not. I wouldn't argue that it's the Bible engaging in word magic. I would say that it's a way that Yahweh is, you could say mocking, or at least it's a polemic against them, right? But one of the most interesting things about that was, we all know the passage where Moses is talking to Yahweh, and Yahweh tells him he's going to go there, and he goes, and Moses is really intimidated, and he goes, I'm slow of words. I'm not a man of words. I'm slow of mouth and all this. And it's been known, it's been debated over the years. Scholars have concluded that he had probably a speech impediment. And there are scriptures that use the same terminology that Moses uses of his, slow of mouth, heavy of mouth. It's connected to speech impediment or stuttering. So he probably had a stuttering. But there's another element to that is very interesting. He knew he was going back to, he knew he's going to go and face the magicians of the court. And Egypt, the Egyptians, even the word magician, the Hebrew word for magician, is sort of their own word for the Egyptian magicians, which were actually called lector priests, because their magic was part of their religion, and they were like the chiefs of the priests. And that's why they were the ones that are confronting Moses in the courts, right? And so, but Moses knows he's going to go back, and he's very educated in the system, and he knows he's going to face these guys who engage in this word magic. And he's like, maybe it was stuttering that he's talking about, but certainly he realizes that I don't have the word magic power to face these guys, and even though he's a follower of Yahweh, he's been heavily, indoctrinated into, Egyptian beliefs, and certainly that's still going in his mind. And it's interesting that God then says, I will be your mouth, it's really, really cool. Right. So when he does the whole snake thing and stuff, and that's a whole nother, discussion we could talk about, but I just find that very fascinating. Again, God is saying, look, I'm going to use a man who does not have the power of the word, because my power goes beyond whatever powers you think you have in that realm, right? My power goes beyond it. I'm going to use a stutterer who can't speak well to overcome your magic. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things like that I was uncovering. But that word element, the incantations, it's just interesting because it still carries on to today. And that's where it's rooted in the notion that language is wrapped up with reality, which is also a very modern. I mean, we've always believed that in the ancient world as well as today, language has power over reality. This is why the modern left, they believe it creates reality. In a way, the modern left is engaging in word magic, because that's why they're changing the words and making the words fit their worldview, because they don't believe there's a reality other than what we can create with our own wills and through language. So in a very real sense, magic has an element to it that goes beyond just the occult into the whole worldview, I would argue, of the modern left today.
And sadly, this has worked its way somewhat into the Christian church here in the West as well. I just did a program about a month ago with John Clash on his book on the word, not word of faith, but the Oh, law of attraction, which is in a sense the word of
Part of
faith
it.
belief. Judd, the this practice goes back to ancient Sumer. This idea that you can invoke certain deities from the spirit realm to assist you in the natural realm. How prominent was this in the world around the ancient Israelites?
Prominent enough so that you see it reflected not just in ancient Israelite culture, but all over, uh, really all over the globe. Uh, the reason that I'm taking it that direction is because I've recently been listening to re-listening to James Frazier's The Golden Bough, the
Ah,
classic book on comparative mythology and religion. Um, as Brian, as you were talking, it made me think about some of the themes that are covered. And although that work is a little dated now, what it did was sort of set the pace for looking at uh, the occurrence of or recurrence of ritual themes, magical themes, and various practices of magicians and sorcerers and witches around the world. Um, and I like what Brian said about in the ancient world, this distinction between the natural and the supernatural was not so much at play uh, as much as it is, let's say, post Enlightenment, where we've sort of intellectually compartmentalized everything. Um, there's an anthropologist named Branislaw Malinowski who wrote a collection of essays called Magic, Science, and Religion, which he looks at these concepts about um, sort of using modern pre-literate, pre-industrial, people's living a kind of Stone Age lifestyle as a laboratory study of this sort of thing. But that he found that was very much the case in societies like take your pick, the Kung Bushman or the Australian Aborigines or the Trobriand Islanders in the South Pacific. They didn't compartmentalize those two things. They were all part of the same corpus, the natural world and the supernatural world. And that's sort of the milieu that these magical specialists did their work in. And they were the aims of what we would consider to be, or I should say that many of the aims of what we would consider to be in the modern world, technological or scientific, were the same aims of these magical professionals within these various societies around the world. And just to sort of bring it back to the Levant and the ancient Near East in general, you're going to find the same kind of mindset at work. Even though we're sort of turning the page between prehistory and early civilization, that mindset is still very much there. That doesn't necessarily separate the natural and the supernatural, the mythological and the historical, all these clear dividing lines that we have for our various areas of study today. You'll find that that's very true in ancient Canaan as well.
the thing that again I keep coming back to is why would God tell Moses to tell the Israelites not to engage in any of this? Why was say Manasseh, for example, the grandson of Hezekiah, or was Manasseh the son or the grandson of Hezekiah? I forget. Anyway, he was singled out for not only sacrificing his children in the fire, but also practicing sorcery. Why would God prohibit this? I guess the bottom line is, does it actually work? Can you actually summon power from the unseen realm using these dark arts? Judd, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure.
Or, oh, go ahead.
Brian,
I was just going to jump in with the Egyptian thing. I think it's a good place to start again. So we have the plagues, right? And everyone knows that the lector priests, I'll call them magicians, but the magicians countered the first few plagues that Moses brought, the blood of the River Nile. And although it's interesting, so And then what were the next? I've actually lost track of the frogs, right? And anyway, I think it's by the time when they get to the third or fourth where there's gnats, I think it is, and they literally can't replicate and then they go, "This is the finger of God." And so, it doesn't say that that it's a fraud, that they turn the water to blood, etc. But I get the impression, and the snakes with the staffs, right? That appears to be, there are possible explanations for that there's been magician tricks throughout all of history to bamboozle people. So my personal take on it is it doesn't explain that it's real or not. And so it's possible, it's certainly possible, for instance, that the snakes were real, although there are examples where they knew how to do that with snakes, make them look like staffs, and then tap them, and they go back to slithery snakes or whatever. But the interesting thing about that particular case is God actually. So Moses does his staff, then they do their staffs, right? And then Moses' snakes eat the magicians; they swallow them, and that, of course, is showing God's superior power. But it's interesting because the Hebrew text actually says his staff swallowed the other staffs, which is kind of weird, I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know, but scholars have pointed to that uniqueness, what's going on there. But this notion of swallowing is also a magical ritual that usually, cannibals also believe in this. And the idea is when you swallow something of the enemy's, or you can swallow your enemy, you are absorbing their power into you, because you are superior. So God's actually saying, whatever your magic is, I am far superior to yours, right? Does that mean God's engaging in magic? No. But it's interesting because when Moses picks up the snake, he picks it up by the tail. And the snake charmers that were well known at that time would have to pick them up by the heads, because that was how they would snake charm them to do their tricks, right? So I think that the text is deliberately showing Moses doing the opposite of what a trick would be. You know what I'm saying? Like a fake trick, just to make the point that this is not a trick, right? So I think that you're certainly within biblical rights to interpret those first few plagues as being literal, somehow occultic type, examples. And if there are, if there are spiritual beings, and in my novel Moses, I do, use the basis of the divine counsel and the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, that there are supernatural powers who are authorities over the nations, and so therefore, and they may have masqueraded as these deities of the nations, and so it's certainly possible that these supernatural entities could do a certain amount of what would be magic to us, or what would be, as we see it, supernatural, right? So I don't have any problem with that. But I'm just acknowledging that it's not settled, on that, but it's certainly possible. But the limit, God overshadows them, and that's the whatever your take on it. That certainly shows the power of God is greater than any power of man or power of the gods. So
much more epic than Gandalf versus Saruman. I might add.
Yeah.
And certainly the kind of thing that would make for a really good movie.
Maybe we should kind of think about defining what magic is. And I don't know that we can come up with a good definition or not, but
I'll take a stab at. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bud.
No, go for it. Go for it, Jed.
No, I just tacking along the anthropological sort of comparative religion approach. And I think this bears out in most of the traditions in the world, is that magic is variant in form, various in form, but the intent is to use some sort of a prescribed formula, some sort of ritual to achieve an end that otherwise would not be possible through what we would term natural means. So in a way, it's a manipulation of a supernatural manipulation of the natural world. And this, again, in the literature, this is pretty much how it's born. I don't think there's a whole lot of debate on that issue, whether we're talking about word magic or ritual magic, ceremonial magic, whatever the medium happens to be. The intent is brought about, or is thought to be brought about, by this manipulation of natural forces. And that can involve anything from, again, incantations, the entire taxonomy of the spirit world. The complexity tends to depend on which society is in question, but there are these sort of universal themes. So that's how I would define magic.
Doug, that was a really good question to bring up, and it's one that occurred to me at the beginning of the program, so I'm glad we went there. Years ago, we interviewed, Sharon and me, a fellow from the West Coast. I believe he was still living in Washington State, named David Duncan, who was in San Francisco during the Summer of Love in 1967 and was working at a communal cafe or something where people would come in and pay whatever they felt like, and then at night, everybody would sit around and listen to poetry readings and smoke pot or whatever. And he was telling us that one night a guru, whose name escapes me at the moment, he was fairly well known back in the 70s, manifested something. And David thought for sure that this was a fallen angel of some sort. But the takeaway from the conversation that's relevant to what we're discussing here was that the people who were following this guy who manifested and claimed he was Lucifer believed that Christians, through prayer, were practicing a very weak form of magic. It's just that most of us don't recognize it as such, which is in part, in their view, why it's so weak. So when we get into discussions like, again, the law of attraction that I discussed with John Clash about a month ago, how do we draw that distinction between prayer and praying to try to manipulate God to get what we want, which I think would be the definition. For me, that would be the definition of the supernatural, trying to manipulate something in the unseen realm to get what I want.
I was going to propose that maybe more of a theological take on this. So it seems to me that magic, and you can go a lot of directions with magic too. I mean, you can do charms and curses, but you could also do medicine. Makes me wonder about the process of fermentation. Is that a form of magic? Because you're manipulating the natural world, and there's a lot of different directions you could go. But it seems to me at the heart, theologically speaking, that magic is a lot like what happened with the sons of God in Genesis 6. It was them coming down here, them crossing over when they weren't supposed to. And then the Tower of Babel, kind of the opposite, us crossing over when we weren't supposed to. And I'm not saying that all things related to magic are that you're not supposed to, but I think that God gives us prescribed ways of dealing with the supernatural and having the supernatural interact with us. As a Reformed Christian, I think about the means of grace, the preached word and the sacraments, that God gives these to us as a way, and prayer would, come very close to that, fellowship. It's like God has given us supernatural means of altering the world, but they're his prescribed ways of doing it, whereas magic is the exact opposite of that. And that's why I think it's forbidden, primarily because this is what he said, you're not supposed to do that because you're supposed to rely on me. Is you were talking way earlier, Brian, I was thinking about Jordan Peterson and his mentor Carl Jung, and going back farther to the Greek philosophers and the Logos, and how they talk, the Logos is like this primordial power or whatever, and it's so essential to the world. Well, that's, that gets kind of the word of faith thing, right? The manipulation of word. But what is that from a Christian point of view? Well, Jesus is the word. I mean, so the word is fundamental to the very nature and essence of God. And so if there's a manipulation of the word, then it's a perversion of what's right, what's good. And that goes back to what I just said about the means of grace. It's through the word that God chooses to make, the foolish things of this world wise. Magic is the exact opposite of that. So there's, I think all these things are circulating around a similar idea in my mind in terms of what magic is versus what we're supposed to do. And I don't think these things are brought up enough.
The Urim and Thummim is a good example of what you're saying. In the ephod, where the priest would get God's will, and we don't know exactly how those work, but there's two different stones probably, and it's that's not much different from divination, but yet, but they were only supposed to do it within that prescribed context with the high priest, etc. But all other divination is definitely forbidden. So that's another example of what you're saying, I think.
By the way, just so people know that I've looked it up and I now know Manasseh was in fact the son of Hezekiah. So just another example of a dad in the Bible who didn't really train up his child in the way he should go. We see that again and again. This can step on some toes when we're talking about this aspect of our prayer lives, because there are those who will look at certain verses in the New Testament where Jesus told his followers that, you pray for what you want, have faith like a mustard seed, and you'll move mountains. And so this has become a very popular subset of Christianity, where people believe that they can declare and decree something and it will be so. Okay, I get it. We're supposed to have faith when we pray. How do we distinguish between that kind of a prayer and crossing that line into treating God as though he's a cosmic genie in a lamp who's obligated to give us what we want if we just ask the right way?
Well, I think you just said it, Derek. It's treating God as a genie, not as the divine creator of the universe.
And I think that it's reflected in if you are approaching your prayers as, and I've heard some of these pseudo-Christians actually describe that what you're describing, the way to pray, name it, claim it, all that kind of stuff. And it really is word magic. I mean, it really is. They are approaching it as if the power is in their words spoken through them. It's very much word magic. Now, is that the same thing as when a humble Christian humbly kneels before God and cries out, "Oh God, save my daughter from this disease," or whatever, yet nevertheless thy will be done? I think there's a big difference. I think that is the difference. It's when you are thinking that, in other words, I think it's a kind of a self-deification. When you're thinking that because my proclamation through my words is the power that's achieving the results, it's getting God to do whatever. That is no different than the Egyptian who believed that if I spoke the right words and did the right ritual, I bind the gods. And then binding is something that's a part of this incantational, worldview, right? And so if that's how you're thinking, you really are thinking blasphemously, I would argue. What's at what point does it turn over and become that? I don't know, but certainly you should look at your heart and ask yourself that,
Well, again, binding is covenantal language. And that kind of goes right back to what I just said, that in fact, the word in German to bunden is the word to bind, and that's the word for a covenant. So it goes back to what I just said with God, that biblical covenant is a covenant that God comes to us and makes with us. This is going the opposite direction. It's almost like you have two kinds of word magic. One is a little w word, and one is a capital W word, the Logos. One is God actually doing something because he is the Logos, and he's given you permission and a means through which to access him. And the other one is you trying to manipulate him because it's your word, like you just said, Brian. It's like they're very close to each other. What we're doing right now is we're engaging in a kind of word magic because we're trying to alter the people's perception and reality and lives and minds and thinking. And
Well,
guess what? It actually works.
yeah,
We're not trying to do it to the end of, what we're talking about with word magic, like you just said.
yeah, it's clearly that end of it is clearly foundational in human language in general. It was one of the things that I talked about in the War of the Words paper that I did a couple of years ago. That there's a cultural engineering going. I mean, you call it that. You could probably also call it magic. You could call it magical engineering that's going on with the very things that we use to communicate, a corruption, if you will, of what God gave us in terms of the way that we interact and communicate with one another. And just in those words that we use for ruler and king, being related to something like, Rava or Rephaim, in that particular study. But to further illustrate the point, and I think we've all talked about this in this particular discussion, but there was an interesting meme that came across my Facebook feed the other day about what most people thought witchcraft looks like, and it had the guys in the black robes and the candles and on the ritualized setting, and that sort of thing, of course, does take place. We know that. But the other panel was what witchcraft really looks like, and it was all of the control of language that we associate with the left and the mainstream media feed and all of that. And so that very manipulation of communication, is disturbingly foundational.
Orwell had it right back in the 1940s. War is peace, love is hate, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. Yeah. And sort of built into language now is this almost Hegelian, mechanism that creates the solution, creates the resolution, and then it's just this non-ending, and whoever's controlling that stream of words, which we might dub word magic, all you have to do is turn on the news or look around or just interact in society today, and you can see the results of it.
Watch a White House press conference.
Yeah,
exactly.
Here's something I want you guys to think about. I'll try not to get it too political, although I think we probably all agree on where I stand basically on this. So I'll try and keep it as general as I can. But I've long wondered about like the technologies that we use, even what we're using right now, and the metaphysics of it, not the physics of it, but the metaphysics of it. Like, what are we engaging in here? And it seems to me at the end of the day, I think that this technology is somehow connected to the supernatural realm. I don't know that I can say that I know how it is, but I think it is. There's light here. There's electricity. The metaphysics of it are just bizarre. And when I look at what's happened to the world over the last 3 years, and it seems to me that it's almost like a kind of spell casting has gone on. People are in like a sleep, a slumber. They're almost like a zombification, an inability to think about things. But how has it come to them? Well, it hasn't come primarily through face-to-face physical interaction. It has come through the manipulation of these technologies and the suppression of these technologies, and all the things that we know that have been going on with the search engines and the social media and all that kind of stuff. But it seems to me that it's just a different kind of spell casting, a different kind of magic. But it still has the same end to it, a cursing of the world or a hypnotizing of people's minds. But they're doing it through this technology that it's like, what even is this stuff in the first place? Could this have happened in a culture where these kind of technologies didn't exist? I don't know the answer to it, but I suspect maybe the answer is not like it has.
Not as easily anyway. Yeah, this is actually a theme I'm exploring in the novel I'm working on right now, which will use the metaverse, or the idea of the metaverse, as a way to spread this sort of spiritual sickness that we're seeing growing across the Western world here. I mean, we look at chaos on the streets, and I believe chaos is a spiritual force. And it is certainly encouraged and facilitated by these little boxes of light and magic that the story out of Philadelphia last weekend, where people were traveling in caravans from one retail center to another, from Center City out to Port Richmond, out to the Northeast, and looting stores. And they were coordinating their activities through social media. Sadly, for one young TikTok influencer or Instagram influencer, she found out that the Philadelphia Police Department were following, were followers of her feed, and so she got arrested. But it's the kind of thing that while we've seen, torch and pitchfork mobs in the past, these can happen a lot faster these days through this technology.
I believe, I suppose an argument could be made that it is a new Tower of Babel, right? Because what was the whole Babel incident about? It was separating mankind because if they unified in their evil, there's no end to the monstrous of what man could do in that unification of evil. So the spread on to nations, the languages, right? And what is the internet or whatever technology, big tech technology is doing? It's allowing us to overcome the separation, not just of our languages, but of the distance and boundaries. And so it's allowing us to unite more readily in the extremism of evil. And that's why the polarity is so extreme in our culture, where, just political differences of what were even just, well, let's be safe. 10 years ago, the political differences were, arguments and debates. And now it's, you're a Nazi. And so you must be destroyed, and your whole life must be destroyed. You must be canceled. You know what I'm saying? Like how did that get to that point? And I think it's the unification of evil, which is a kind of a deification of man, right? So I could see all these elements being accomplished. Does that mean technology itself is evil? Should we become Luddites? Is it the Tower of Babel, literally, and that it's evil for us to engage in this? I don't believe so. Because I believe I believe that technology is actually man's God-given command to have dominion over nature. It's through, right? So, but when evil man gets in, when evil humankind gets a hold of it, they build the Tower of Babel. Mm-hmm. So, but it's, it's where do you come down on that? I don't.
And here's the other question: where does this all come from? Judd, you did excavation work, and you did your dissertation on Banyas, the Grotto of Pan there at the base of Mount Hermon, which was, according to the Book of First Enoch, where the Watchers descended. And according to First Enoch, you've got Shemiyaza, who taught humanity sorcery and spells, but then later in First Enoch chapter 9, Azazel or Azazel is blamed for all of that. What responsibility do these fallen members of the unseen realm bear for this kind of word magic, sorcery, root cutting, fortune telling, witchcraft, sorcery?
Well, I think they bear a lot of the responsibility for the introduction of these concepts. I've said on any number of occasions, and all of us here agree, I'm sure, that what the Watchers taught was this combination of the occult and practical sciences. It was knowledge, but it was taught with their agenda in mind. It's almost like, to make an analog today, so a computer chip, let's say, Elon Musk's technology that he's looking at, the Neuralink kind of stuff, that could easily, if that helps somebody walk, or a quadriplegic to be able to move, or somebody to be able to see for the first time in their life, that's a good use of that technology. But the flip side is that it could just as easily be weaponized and help people like, Harari achieve his aim of humans becoming these transhuman gods, in the near future. So to bring it back to the Watchers, they bear the responsibility of the agenda that this information was contextualized in, and to what end it was supposed to be utilized. And so, in that respect, the first humans that were the beneficiaries, or I should say, the rather unfortunate beneficiaries of what they were teaching, were in many ways the first sorcerers and magicians and witches, if you will. Not that those kind of practices didn't happen before that, but we've got a concentrated example in Enoch and Jubilees and Jasher, the Genesis Apocryphon, the Book of Giants, and of course the canonical Genesis account, that we've got a focused study of when that happened. Did it happen before? Probably so, but it seems to be more concrete and articulated in this case. So I would say that, yeah, the Watchers bear a large part of the responsibility. And I would say that they that's also anchored by the fact that they receive judgment for it pretty quickly in the antediluvian world.
Let me throw out one of you guys here. So it's related to what you brought up. I'm glad you brought up Enoch. Most people go to the Enoch 7 and 8 chapters and the making of swords and teaching us warfare, and I think there it has especially the cutting of roots and the making of medicine and this kind of stuff. The chapter that most people don't go to is First Enoch 69. So this is out now of the Book of the Watchers, and it's probably in the third book of Enoch if it's a 5-book compilation.
This is First Enoch 69. That'd be in the Book of Parables.
Yeah, okay, for Book of Parables. So First Enoch 69, and it gives us another long list of these. And my question to you guys is, before I read it, is it so cut and dry that when we read these, we're to think as the reader that, oh, the Watchers taught us these things, therefore they're all evil? Because that's kind of how I take it. Like, okay, well, they taught us swords and warfare, so it must have been an evil thing that they did.
And by the way, makeup too.
And makeup too. Yeah, I know. I know that's the thing. It's like you read it and you go, well, is that really that bad? And then my mind goes, well, okay, well, Jezebel, she's the only one really talked about makeup, so it's got to be bad. Or you read in chapter 69 that they taught the smiting of the embryo in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you've got abortion in that chapter. It's okay, so that's got to be bad. But the one that I always thought was probably the weirdest one of all these starts in verse 8. It's talking about an entity named Pename. And it says, this one demonstrated to the children of the people the bitter and the sweet, and which is interesting for, I think, what we're talking about with sorcery, the bitter and the sweet. Is that related? I don't know. Revealed to them all the secrets of their wisdom. Furthermore, he caused the people to penetrate the secret of writing and the use of ink and paper. On account of this matter, there are many who have erred from eternity to eternity until this very day, for human beings are not created for such purposes to take up their beliefs with pen and ink. But the thing about it is, this is being written on pen and ink. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to think about what is being taught here? I just think it's absolutely fascinating.
I think there's another way of looking at this. I'm looking at the Hermania translation, which is a more modern translation by George W.E. Nicholsburg, and
I was reading from the Charlesworth translation.
Okay. So. And he renders it, he gave humans knowledge about writing with ink and papyrus, and therefore many went astray from of old and forever and until this day. For humans were not born for this purpose, to confirm their trustworthiness through pen and ink. I think that's a condemnation of lawyers. Because certainly can't be talking about writers, because all of us are, published authors. So certainly we're okay.
Well, actually, this is a common aspect in the ancient world because writing was reserved exclusively for the upper classes, the scribal classes, et cetera, for many centuries, millennia. And so there is this underlying, and the Greeks also had this, they would make the same claim that, writing is bad because it, they're used to memorizing everything, and writing things down violates the human mind. So I think that there is a kind of an ancient bias against writing because of the fact that it was so unique to a few people. And so, a lot of people didn't, we're really wondering what's going on there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and fortunately, because Enoch isn't scripture, we can critique it on that basis. Oh, that's just part of the bias of the ancient mindset. But.
Given the political situation that was going on in Judea when this was written, this was probably written in the last quarter of the 1st century BC. This part of the book of First Enoch, when Judea had been through. You had a civil war, essentially. Alexander Jannaeus, who was a Sadducee, and the Pharisees tried to bring down the Greek king of the Seleucids, Demetrius, and they fought near Shechem and won, but then Demetrius turned around and went back because his father died and he had to fight to keep his throne. So Jannaeus crucified a bunch of Pharisees who left Jerusalem and moved up north to live around the Essenes, who were writing this part of the book of First Enoch. And then the Parthians came in and took over and put their puppet on the throne. And then the Romans came in and put their puppet on the throne. And it was, there was a lot of stuff going on. So for the average people in Judea back in that period, especially after the Romans took over, things got really tough. So kings, landlords, the class who would have had control of the temple, but also had control of the land, were not well liked in that period when this was being written. And it was because of that and their belief that the earth had been so corrupted by the fallen realm. And this was a fundamental difference between the Essenes and the Pharisees and Sadducees. The Essenes believed the earth had been so corrupted by the sin of the Watchers, the reason for the book of First Enoch being written down in the first place, that only direct intervention by God himself through the Son of Man would fix things, whereas the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the temple elite, believed, no, we've got this. As long as we keep performing the rituals and following the law, everything will be fine. But the Essenes, the Enochians, if you will, said, no, that's not how things are going to work. The world is totally messed up, and only direct intervention. God's got to come back. Yahweh's got to come back. Hashem has to come back through his divine agent and fix it. And it was because of the direct intervention of the interference of the angels as described in 1 Enoch 6, 7, 8, and 9. So magic and witchcraft and sorcery and learning how to do all that stuff, which included, I suppose, word magic, but through the written word, which transmitted that knowledge down over the generations.
That's the point is that if these chapter 69 and 7 and 8, if what they're doing is attributing this supernatural, natural bridge of all these things, there's a connection between the two realms from all these different aspects. It seems to me that then everything that would be under these 2 lists or 3 lists or however many there are would by definition have to be a form of sorcery. By definition. So writing, according to this, would be a kind of sorcery that you can then use and manipulate. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they thought it was bad. I don't know.
But of course, like anything else or like any other technology, I mean, Jesus told his disciples to carry a sword with them when he sent them out into the world. And certainly the early church used letter writing back and forth to teach on the points of doctrine, also encourage and exhort one another to maintain the faith and to good works. I guess it's all on how the technology gets used. But
and whether or not God gives you permission to use them, or how you're supposed to go about using them, I think it makes all the difference.
I think it's a really fascinating point you're making, Doug. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, in the sense of, could technology actually be a kind of a means of connecting, interacting with the spiritual world? And the modernist in me, has been indoctrinated, right? Immediately, I mean, no, technology is a neutral thing, but you make a good point in terms of, okay, a Ouija board is technology. And I believe that it actually is the you're opening yourself up to. That's the key, is the element of the demonic or the occultic realm is you're opening yourself up. So these rituals and what you're engaging is it opening you up to the dark world. And I would believe doing Ouija boards does, but as you're saying, technically that's technology. And then I think of drugs, which you brought up in the very beginning.
Right.
That's the other component that I've always thought, LSD and all that stuff. I can totally see how it could be a physical, because we've all had like hallucinations, little ones here and there. Like the mind can play games on itself, tricks on itself. And certainly drugs can do funny things to you, And so why not these LSD trips and those like it, where it seems like there's entities involved? My initial reaction is, sure, that could be all physical. But then, like what you're saying, yeah, well, just because it is a physical drug and it is affecting your physical brain doesn't mean it's not opening you up to a realm beyond that physical realm. And it makes sense to me that that's certainly an element of what may be going on there in a way that I had not previously, accepted that in the past. But now I'm more open to that possibility that, just that doesn't mean all drugs is bad. It's just drugs can be, when used in that, again, the context, a forbidden type approach, context to it, then why couldn't it be a doorway, a portal of connecting with the evil spiritual realm, which would make some of those possible hallucinations maybe real entities? Absolutely. I guess I'm sharing my own sort of personal journey. I haven't thought much about that stuff, but it does make more sense to me if taken in the broader context of what magic and sorcery really is, and the biblical words.
It's interesting to think about the smiting of the embryo in the womb, and just in the larger context of like Molech worship and that sort of stuff that's kind of always been associated with child sacrifice. Because here again, you have in that case, you have abortion that's directly being tied by this ancient text to some sort of sorcery, because that knowledge is coming to us from the other side. So all of a sudden, this medical procedure that some people look at that's just a medical procedure, all of a sudden it takes on a supernatural characteristic if you're reading it through the lens of whoever wrote this part of the first Enoch.
That's one of the things that really
think about, isn't it?
Well, that's one of the things that really surprised me when I was doing the research for the second coming of Saturn, was that in Leviticus 20 and in Deuteronomy 18, God, speaking to Moses, just specifically connects the practice of summoning spirits from the netherworld, the mediums and necromancers, to the practice of passing children through the fire, sacrificing them to Molech. So there is a direct connection there in summoning these gods from the underworld. And I think that's part and parcel of it. It's not so much a technology for manipulating the unseen realm as trying to manipulate spirits in the unseen realm to do what you want them to do. And the question is, what are you giving up to them in order to get what you want? And this is, I think, why John told his readers, test the spirits, for not all are from God. It's getting back to the idea right at the beginning of the discussion. God didn't tell the Israelites not to do something just because it's a waste of time. It doesn't work. Don't waste your time on this. John is saying, yeah, there are spirits out there that will answer. So test them to make sure you're talking to the ones who are faithful.
And it's always a bargain with these spirits. It's always some sort of exchange. It's always some sort of covenant, and that is borne out not just in the ethnographies that have been written over the last 200 years, but it's borne out in the societies that have had written records. The history of ritual magic is rife with. If you could boil it down to two components, it's the supernatural and this formulaic covenant. That's sort of preserved to us in a Western tradition as the Faustian deal. But that's always seems to be always part of it, and that explains, at least in some part, John's prohibition that you referenced a minute ago.
That's one of the things that another thing that really surprised me in trying to get my head around the ritual practices of the ancient Hurrian people, who were the Horites of the Bible, lived in the northern crescent of the Fertile Crescent, north of Israel, the northern part, like the Kurdish regions of Syria and Iraq, and their rituals seem to go back to the middle of the 4th millennium BC, prior to the invention of writing. But boy, some of their practices look like things that we see on TV today, in the description of, in the cartoons about witchcraft, or the movies that we see coming out of Hollywood. Well, yeah, if you put a protective circle of salt on the floor around you, then the spirit you've summoned will leave you alone. They were doing that 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
But of course, where'd they get that information? From the very spirits that you're trying to control. Hey, yeah, I will totally leave you alone if you draw a circle on the floor with flour. It'll be great. Yeah. I'm helpless. I'm your servant.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that always amazes me about the practitioners and the ritual magicians who think that they've got it licked, who think that somehow they've obtained power over the spirit realm, that they're doing these rituals that have been revealed to them by the very entities that they think they control. How do they know these spirits didn't lie?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the bottom line is that we go back to Leviticus and Deuteronomy and just follow the Lord's prohibition and John's wise counsel. When we encounter these spirits, test them, because A, they're real, and B, they're not all friendly. And yes, some of the trips that are being taken now, both physically and virtually, through DMT or ayahuasca or other drugs to open oneself up to the spirit realm, is the very definition of pharmakia. Dr. Rick Strassman's experiments with DMT, where he had volunteers who were seeing the same thing at the same time. Given that mass hallucination is not a thing, these people were seeing into the spirit realm and describing the same thing independently of one another. And so I think we've got some good scientific evidence that pharmakia actually does work, and is a very dangerous practice, because those entities, according to the witnesses, were at best ambivalent to their presence in the spirit realm. You can talk to Josh Peck about this sometime, when he was engaging in astral projection. The entities that he encountered were not happy that he was intruding on their turf. Pastor Doug Van Dorn, Brian Goodella, Dr. Judd Burton, fascinating as always, and as always, just a scratch on the surface of a very deep topic. Thanks for your time, and we'll do this again next month. Links in the show notes to all of their websites, where you can follow the work of Judd, Brian, and Doug. And please take advantage of the content that they are putting out there. Doug's sermons are all out there online. Brian offers a lot of free content at his website related to his many writings. Judd Burton as well, all over social media. He is a go-to guest for some of these things, and he'll be back in just a couple of weeks for our annual, and this will be the 10th in a row, actually, our annual Halloween episode, so don't miss that. Again, an honor to call these men friends. Coming up, I will give you, I couldn't pick, it's the two absolute worst takes of the week from pundits on the Israel-Hamas war. We'll let you decide to whom you prefer to say, bless their pointy little heads, and an update on our Build Barn Better project straight ahead on A View from the Bunker.
Hi, everybody. Believe it or not, this is October, and that means you get a brand new GHTV special offer.
We're approaching Halloween, the time of year when the world around us is focused on ghosts and goblins and devils and demons.
But they're real.
They're real, and we'd like to give you good information about those entities with our October special. First, our book Veneration, where we analyze the ancient cult of the Nephilim, the origin of demons exposed in this book. Vicki Joy Anderson's important book, They Only Come Out at Night, about night terrors and sleep paralysis.
You need this book at home for your kids and grandkids. Trust me, it is a great book.
And 7 hours of audio interviews with the late Dr. Michael Heiser about the nature of the unseen realm.
Oh, this is a collector's disc.
It really is. Altogether, these 3 items purchased separately worth $65 during the month of October, just $35 plus shipping and handling. Take advantage of this because this is good, solid, scholarly information, especially the content from Dr. Heiser.
It is, and particularly this month, you want to be armed with the truth when your family asks, what about witches? What about wizards? What about these things at Halloween? What do we do with this? It's a time to teach.
Absolutely. Take advantage of our October special offer, Veneration. They only come out at night, and The Unseen Adversary, yours for just $35 plus shipping and handling only at gilberthouse.org/store. Talking the Walk every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at vftb.net. Subscribe to the podcast there. Got links on all the various podcatchers that will allow you to do it. If you're watching on YouTube, God bless you. Subscribe, share, and then, as I said at the top of the program, please download our free app. Get the Roku version if you want to throw the video up to your TV as easily as possible. But if you've got a relatively recent smart TV, the mobile app will let you do it with Chromecast, Google's Chromecast, or Apple's AirPlay. And then you've also got the additional features in the app, including an audio Bible with multiple translations, cross-references, Bible verses, as we discuss in our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, and just a lot of additional features that they can't put into the Roku or Apple TV channels. Again, you'll find that at gilberthouse.org/app. On social media, you got all of those. Okay, you've already seen all that stuff. Build Barn Better. The end is in sight. Don't have new video for you this weekend, but we will within another weekend. I'm recording this on Friday the 13th, Friday afternoon. So I don't have this new video yet, but we did have some furniture delivered. We found some special sales deals on furniture, some office furniture and some set furniture, actually outdoor furniture. But, it will look good with the sort of distressed barnwood look of the paneling that's going up on the walls. And so we'll have that for you next weekend. But we spent Saturday putting that together with the help of a dear friend, Lynn Shepard, who has just relocated the area from Seattle. She's retired, moved down this way. She's been with us to Israel twice now and going with us again, God willing, in March. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But we put the furniture together. So hopefully by next weekend, we'll have some video that we can show you of how things are coming together. Dave and Barb of Christ Powered Construction working on getting the paneling up as time allows. And we got enough on the back wall now for the 5 and 10 set, for the podcast set, so we can start doing A View from the Bunker out there. And Unraveling Revelation will soon be coming to you from the barn as well. Once we get lighting set, that will probably actually be the trickiest part of this whole thing. But you can find out more at gilberthouse.org/donate. You have made this possible because we were not going to go into debt to finance this, and you have made that unnecessary. So it is only through your generosity that this has come to fruition. And again, we are just a couple of weeks away from actually getting things out there, set up, and rolling on a regular basis out there. And I know Sharon is looking forward to that because as I'm in here trying to edit video and listening to audio, it's very hard for her to concentrate when she's trying to write in the next room. So she will appreciate me being away where I can make all the noise I want to without disrupting her concentration, and that is truly a blessing. Well, of course, there are many things happening this weekend. I have not talked to this point in the program about Tom Horn because his situation has been day to day. If you're not familiar with it, as of this recording on Friday afternoon, and bear in mind that by the time you see this on Sunday night, things may have changed. So I'm not going to give a specific update as what is happening beyond now, because it may not be relevant or may not be accurate by the time you watch this program or hear this program. But earlier this week, Tom was admitted to hospital in Springfield, Missouri, suffering from severe chest pains. There was some hope from the family that this was a hiatal hernia, but it turned out that he had a 100% blockage of the artery leading into his heart. This is the kind of blockage that is euphemistically referred to as a widowmaker. But thankfully, he was there in time. The doctors were able to insert a stent into that artery to open up blood flow to the heart. But he struggled for a couple of days, a lot of pain, fluid buildup on his lungs and around his kidneys. As of this recording, he is much more comfortable. He has gotten some rest. He is lucid, coherent, talking with the family. Nita, his wife, is there. The children, Allie, Donna, Joe, are there. The grandchildren, Tom's grandchildren, are there as well. So, again, that is as of 5 p.m. Friday afternoon. Now, again, by the time you're seeing or hearing this, this may all be old news, inaccurate. We're praying for a healing. I pray that is what has happened by the time you actually watch or hear this. But if you were not aware, that is the situation with Tom Horn this past week. So obviously we've got some other things on our mind. Certainly the Horn family more so than us, but those of us who've been blessed by Tom's ministry and who've been blessed to call Tom our friend, we are praying that the Lord sees fit to grant Tom more time with us, I should say. I know that's a selfish request because in a glorified body, Tom would not trade places. But I know for the sake of his wife, his children, his grandchildren, and those who are blessed by the work at Whispering Ponies Ranch, I'm sure he would opt for more time in this mortal frame, in spite of the pain and imperfections of this biological shell that surrounds our spirits. So that is what's going on with Tom, and of course we've also got the situation in Iran as. You know by now, Hamas invaded Israel last Saturday morning, sneak attack. There are questions that are being asked now about what happened, how this could possibly happen. The Israeli intelligence services and security services, Mossad, Shin Bet, the IDF, how is it possible that they were taken so completely off guard? Based on what we've been able to piece together from open source intel, meaning corporate news sources, and trying to find the chunks of truth in the stew of lies, it appears that Hamas, aware of the technological superiority of the Israelis, used very low-tech means to communicate and thus kept their plans secret until the very last minute. Don't use phones, don't use the internet, communicate everything in writing, and keep it to a very small circle. That appears to be what they've done. There is also some word, and I got this from a friend, Stefan Caraway, of Fig Tree Watchers Ministries in California. Fig Tree Watchers, and I'll put a link to their website. I've been on his program a couple of times. It basically focuses on Bible studies, but he's got some connections that are involved in intelligence. Regarding military intelligence. So his connection, his contacts indicate that as with any strength in war, any strategic advantage can also be turned into a disadvantage if the enemy is smart enough. For example, the French Maginot Line leading up to World War II, a line of incredibly fortified installations along the border with Germany, basically impenetrable if you were to launch a direct assault on the Maginot Line. Heavily, reinforced concrete bunkers with artillery and machine gun ports and so forth, impenetrable. The French were confident the Maginot Line will always hold. The Germans will never be able to invade. So the Germans didn't. They went through Belgium. The disadvantage of a heavily fortified position is that it's not mobile. This, was evident back in the first Gulf War when people were saying the American soldiers charging into Iraq against the fortified positions in Iraq would face just high casualty rates. And I was thinking to myself, surely General Norman Schwarzkopf has studied enough military history to know you're not going to charge right at the fortified positions. And of course, that's exactly, I mean, of course, he knew what he was doing. And the American invasion went around the fortified positions instead of straight at them. So what Hamas appears to have done is taken advantage of Israel's increasing dependence on automated and computer-controlled monitoring systems, surveillance systems along the border between Gaza and the Negev. And they disabled through computer hacking, but also through using drones to strike cell towers and observation posts. So cameras and sensors were disabled very quickly, which blinded the Israeli military to the front-end loaders and bulldozers approaching the border fence to breach the fence. Now, you would think, okay, wait a minute. When the sensors went offline, why didn't IDF respond to that? Again, that's a question that will have to be answered by the Israelis in the weeks and months ahead. I don't see this being of any benefit to Benjamin Netanyahu. His political career may be over because of this. Looking back at what happened in 1973 after the Yom Kippur War, Golda Meir and General Moshe Dayan, who'd basically been legend in Israel after the miraculous war, Six-Day War, 1967. After 1973, their political careers were finished. The Israelis will not forget, and this may be, sadly, Benjamin Netanyahu's legacy as the longest-serving prime minister of Israel, but the prime minister on whose watch the worst military defeat in Israel's, the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history took place. So I just don't see any benefit to Netanyahu here. There may be fifth column elements inside Israel that helped perpetuate this, help facilitate this. I don't know. I don't have any information to that effect. According to Stefan Caraway, the information about the intelligence from the intelligence contact appears to check out. And this just shows an over-reliance on artificial intelligence and computer-operated and controlled high-tech surveillance systems. Yes, they have a strength in that they're very vigilant. They never sleep. They, don't need coffee breaks or to go to the bathroom. They can't be bribed or bought off. They can, however, be hacked, and the sensors they need for input can also be disabled through relatively low-tech means. Consumer drone with an explosive mounted to it, or some such thing. That is the inherent weakness in a tactical strength. The use of AI and these automated surveillance systems along the border. So the worst takes by pundits of the week. There have been a number of things this week and that have just really set me off, and I don't want to get angry, so I'm not going to go there. But these are just two that show that you don't necessarily need to be exceptionally bright to be a nationally syndicated columnist or host a nationally syndicated television program. Again, it's not to set myself up as smarter than them or anything like that. I just try not to say stuff that I don't know to be a fact. Anyway, or that I can't at least corroborate with some kind of evidence, whether that evidence turns out to be accurate or inaccurate. That's my guiding principle. I'd rather answer to, than answer to YouTube for number of clicks or what have you. First, columnist for the Washington Post, Jennifer Rubin, who is ostensibly, allegedly, a Republican. Although, from what I've seen of her work, and I don't read her column, I just read the dumb things that occasionally go viral that she posts, I just don't see in what sense she's actually a conservative. She's one of those conservatives that's trotted out by liberal media to say, look, even the conservatives hate Donald Trump or whatever. She actually, on last Sunday, October 7th, next Saturday would be October 7th, posted to social media that what led to the Hamas sneak attack, the terror attack on Israel, was the Republican vote to remove House Speaker Kevin McCarthy from his position. Because the confusion of the House and the fact that the House cannot now advance legislation until a new speaker is voted in gave Hamas the window of opportunity to attack. Seriously, Jennifer, Hamas was sitting there, according to documents that have been found since then, but even just common sense, looking at the scope and coordination involved for the success in the eyes of Hamas of this attack, that they were sitting back and waiting to see how the vote would turn out on Kevin McCarthy, whether the recall vote or the motion to vacate the chair would actually pass. Oh, they voted him out. Let's go, 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 go. Seriously, that's your takeaway? Given that only 8 Republicans voted to vacate and all 212, I guess, Democrats voted to vacate, wouldn't the responsibility, if this were even a truth, wouldn't responsibility lie with Democrats? Especially because once a new speaker is chosen, it's likely to be somebody who's less likely to cooperate with Democrats than Kevin McCarthy was, but that's a whole nother issue. Anyway, so that's the takeaway from Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post. House Republicans voting to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House is responsible. They are responsible for allowing Hamas to attack Israel and kill 1,300 Israelis. Now, running a close second, if not actually exceeding this in, I don't even know what to call it without getting really rude. Sonny Hostin, who is one of the hosts of The View on ABC, actually said that what Hamas did reminded her of other terrorist organizations because, you know, they are a terror organization, just like the Proud Boys here in the United States. Now, the Proud Boys, kind of a nationalist group, conservative, a couple of their leaders actually sentenced to rather lengthy prison terms for their roles in the protests at the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. If you might remember, the only fatalities in that event were of protesters Sonny Hostin actually comparing the 1,300 Israelis slaughtered and 150 more now held hostage, including infants and the elderly and the disabled, to a rather raucous protest on January 6th of 2021. I'm not sure what level of lack of self-awareness is required to actually make a statement like that, for that to even cross one's mind, much less making that statement on a nationally syndicated television broadcast. Well, you know, all you can do is just roll your eyes and say, bless their pointy little heads. Going to North Dakota in just a couple of weeks. I will be up there the final weekend of the month, October 27th and 28th. This is for a small gathering called the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering at the Eagles Club in Valley City, North Dakota. I'm looking forward to this because my mother is from North Dakota, and I have not seen that state in 45 years. And this week, I finally remembered to bring the schedule of events. I'll be speaking at 7 p.m. on Friday the 27th and Saturday the 28th, talking about giants in the Bible on Friday night, why they're important, not fringe. On Saturday night, demons, dragons, and devils. Since Halloween is just a few days ahead, or a few days away after that event, be talking about that there. But hope you can join us there for the event. Other events there, I mean, this is really a gathering of small farmers and homesteaders to just share best practices. Basically demonstrations and workshops on things like winter sowing, preserving food, link between seeds, gardens, self-sufficiency, and resilience. Kind of important in these times. Beginning bird watching, fermentation, raising kids, as in goats, not children. Buying, selling, and marketing goats, cover rotation, things like that. Those are the other types of events that'll be there that weekend. Rather unique gathering. I'm really looking forward to it because this will be a bit different. And if you're in eastern North Dakota, northern South Dakota, western Minnesota, please consider joining us. It's the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering, October 27th and 28th. And you can find out more at our website, gilberthouse.org. If you've got our app, look under the calendar for upcoming events, or go to the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering page at Facebook. There is a Skywatch TV virtual conference coming up. It looks likely that this will be delayed just a little bit. We had originally set it for, I think November 10th was the start date. That's probably going to back up into December now. Just with everything that's going on. So just keep your eyes open for more information from Skywatch TV at defenderconference.com. That's the website, defenderconference.com. Now, we are still planning on going to Israel next spring. We've had some questions, people asking us about whether, with all that's going on, we are still going to go to Israel. At this point, we've not even considered the possibility that we might not go. That's just not that we're foolhardy or anything. We just believe that the Lord is going to bring this to a conclusion soon enough and calm things down well enough that we will go and that we will be safe. We were there in 2018 when Hamas kicked up days of rage at the border because President Trump had moved the embassy. We were there on the 70th anniversary of Israel's independence, and the first day the signs went up in Jerusalem, U.S. Embassy this way. Truly a blessing. In fact, you can't see it here in my office, but I've got the Jerusalem Post, the full page from the newspaper that day. Promises made, promises kept. Thank you, Mr. President. And of course, Donald Trump with his trademark, thumbs up. So we are looking forward to that again, that experience again. That is returning to Israel, not being there while people are rioting. But we will keep an eye on the situation. And if that changes and we need to postpone, well, we had to do that between 2020 and 2023. So we're no strangers to having to reschedule, and we will adjust accordingly. But assuming all goes as planned, God willing, we'll be there March 31st through April 9th with Timothy Alberino as our special guest. And if you want to see the Holy Land and show the world that we have not been given a spirit of fear, I pray you think about joining us. You can find out more at gilbertsinisrael.com, gilbertsinisrael.com, and we will have a new tour video showing off what we saw in 2023 within the next few months. Working on that right now and looking forward to getting the new workstation set up out there in the barn to get that finished up as soon as possible. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen to this podcast, wherever that may be. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher. It's not Stitcher anymore, it's Pandora, or wherever else you find us. And if you would, give us a like at our Facebook page. Our announcer is the inimitable D.C. Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.